Welcome to Dimensional Shift, where we explore and actively deprogram ourselves, seek the truth of reality through expanding our perceptions, and focus on full remembrance of our true selves. As we begin to connect to our true selves, we will also see the truth of this illusory reality and the way it controls us through our manipulated perceptions. As soon as we fully remember our true selves, we will also see the enemy for what it is and how to rebalance the system by freeing ourselves and assisting others to do the same, creating a domino effect into the evolution of human consciousness. Welcome back to Dimensional Shift for Starseeds. Today we're going to be talking about something that came to me a week ago in sort of a fever dream / astral travel, galactic channeling in my sleep kind of thing. It was one of those nights where you wake up feeling like you've run a marathon because you've been so busy all night. So that was fun. But the information I received was very startling to me. Although I had an inkling that something similar to this was going on, it was still kind of stressful to hear that this is what was actually happening. So to start, we want to begin with the matrix, or the system, whatever you prefer to call it. Most of us are of the belief that Earth is not a school. We didn't come here to learn lessons. And even though I released an episode previous to this that said the original purpose of Earth was for galactic beings to come here and be able to enjoy themselves and experience pleasure, that was taken over, right? It was seen as a really great opportunity to have a food source that was kind of a captive audience, if you will. So there are these predatory beings. Some call them the Archeons. Some call them agents. The name that I was getting during that night was Archeons, which is a really interesting kind of play on words. And I don't know if that was propaganda or not. It kind of feels like it was. Like, we are eternal beings. And they kept giving me the message that it's a symbiotic relationship, which I don't believe at all. So take that with a grain of salt. They use us for fuel, especially our emotional states. They feed on our negativity and fear, which is why we have so much negativity and fear in the world right now. The more they can sensationalize the news and use psychology and marketing to keep us on our toes and keep us trapped in social media, the more they have control over us and the more they can manipulate our emotional states. Now, these beings are, in a way, eternal, as are most galactic beings, but they're not self-sustaining. They are a purely predatory being, meaning they can't reproduce, they can't sustain themselves, sustain their avatars or their energy field without feeding on something or someone. You can go back into one of my first episodes, I talk about this. It's episode 4, Your Emotional Labor, a Labor of Love or Emotional Bondage. It basically says that emotions are easy to evoke and they're hard to control on our end. Not only that, but they can do it in such a way that it keeps us controlled. So they keep us in these fear and negativity cycles. And that keeps us in the karmic cycle system or the karmic debt system. Also, we have a little bit of the ancestral DNA coming through where we're fulfilling ancestral cycles as well. This goes into reincarnation, so if that's not one of your beliefs, please disregard that. But if you're listening to this, I'm going to assume it is. So they're keeping us in these karmic cycles because we imprint on some kind of negative experience, the emotion gets attached to it, and we make it mean something about us. So let's just say I failed 7th grade, and that means I'm a worthless person and I'm never going to be successful. So failing 7th grade is an objective statement, making it mean something about you that you're worthless and you're never going to be successful. That's the emotion and the negative belief. And that is what creates the loop. Because your next lifetime, you're going to approach 7th grade and you're going to have this inkling where, oh man, I'm really afraid of 7th grade. What's going on here? But it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because you're afraid of 7th grade. You end up doing worse. And it keeps us in this constant loop. So we have this reincarnation, and the information that I was shown was that we go through this process as a new soul when we first come here. That's called the shattering. And that basically means that they give you the absolute worst first lifetime that you can have in order to break you. That's literally their objective. They will do whatever they can to manipulate your reality and your perception of reality, as well as play into your psychology and psychic and spiritual energy that will break your soul. That's essentially what it does. When you die, your soul fractures. This is a common theme in shamanism, where you have soul retrievals where you go and you find this piece of you in whatever part of your life you left it in, and you reintegrate it so you can become a more whole person. This is kind of the same thing, except that it's kind of a forced deal. We don't necessarily get a choice in this, and that's why so many starseeds are having so much difficulty with the way the world is. As for me, I've been here for millennia. I've been here since the fall of the Egyptian Empire. So my shatterings, each lifetime we go through a shattering, and my shatterings are kind of like old hat, old news, this again. I'm stuck in the karmic cycle. But a lot of starseeds are new souls, or they're new here, and they're going through this shattering the first time, and they're struggling. Maybe you're struggling. And that's okay, because that's what the system is designed to do. It's designed to break you down. And knowing that gives you power. So after we have a shattering, we die, we have a shattering, or the shattering, it gets worse. Sorry to say, it gets worse. Not only do they break you, but they're breaking everybody else. And then they do this thing called soul splicing. And that is basically where they take a shard of you and a shard of another person and maybe a shard of a third person, fourth, fifth, who knows how many, and they splice them together to make a shell of a soul. You're still you, it's just a very specific part of you, and you're stuck together with all these other parts of a soul, and then you're reinserted into a body. You're reincarnated. And this leads to even more confusion and fighting against ourselves as we progress through our lives, which deepens the reincarnation cycle. It deepens the negativity and the fear. We don't understand who we are because we feel like we're more than one person, or we feel like we're duplicitous, or maybe we're even to the point of serious mental health issues where we don't even know what reality is. We don't know who we are. We maybe have something like dissociative identity disorder, previously known as multiple personality disorder, where we have these experiences that aren't our own. And it's very confusing. And so this is kind of a spiritual take on those, where maybe the system, which says that maybe you're not mentally well, is because you're spiritually unwell by their doing. Now, please, I'm going to preface this with, if you have mental health issues, talk to somebody, because it can help. I'm not a mental health expert. Now, it gets really interesting because you can actually go through and discover the different fragments of souls that are in you or with you by looking at the sections of your lives. Each section of our lives or phase of our lives is a different soul expressing. For example, right now I'm expressing a soul that feels very strongly about the psychic experiments in the 50s and 60s. And that started in 2020. Before that, I had a phase from about 2010 to 2020 when I became a mother, and I've discovered that that has a strong resonance with being a Holocaust victim with a baby. Whether or not you go in depth with these soul fragments is up to you, and it's up to the soul fragment. This particular soul fragment did not want to go into detail about what she had gone through. She just wanted to give me a bit of her story, and then she was ready to move on. Before that, I was a New Orleans woman in the late 1800s, and I was trapped in a marriage, and I basically withered away. Before that, I was a French revolutionary, and before that, I was a classical era composer. Now, you may have noticed that these go back in order nicely. And that's because I have figured out how many soul fragments I have, and I've been able to divide that into my age, which gives me about how many years each of those lifetimes lasted. And then I've been able to go back in a cyclical nature and see when those lifetimes began and when they ended. Now, as a general rule, I've done about 50 years. I know each lifetime was probably not exactly 50 years, but I'm okay with a little bit of leniency here. So going a little more in depth on my story, starting about the year 2000, I became obsessed with violin. I played violin, and I became determined to be the concertmaster. And by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I was the concertmaster because I was so dedicated. But I had this underlying urge to be perfect. And if you look at the correlation to being a classical era composer, there is a very strong urge to be perfect because oftentimes you composed for royalty or you composed for aristocrats, and anything less than astounding was not good enough. It could mean life or death because if you were fired, you may not be able to feed your family. Now, the conundrum came for me at 17 when I had a total personality flip. I went from concertmaster, straight A student, honor roll, to goth, rebel, dating the bad boy, sick of life, F my parents, all of that. You couldn't be more different, more black and white, more ends of the polarity, right? And I've discovered that that is when the French Revolutionary soul fragment shifted into my life. And the French Revolutionary is very much about screw authority. We're not doing this the way that you want me to. I'm going to be and dress and act how I want, all of that. That lasted for about 4 years, and then it switched into the abusive relationship, trapped New Orleans woman, soul fragment. And then it was 2010 before it switched over again. You can actually do this yourself. Explore your timeline. So first you're going to have to create a timeline of your life and look at major shifts. Just like I went from concertmaster to goth, you're going to have to look at times, maybe not that extreme, you're going to have to look at times that you had a shift in your personality, in your lifestyle, in your life circumstances, in your reality. And then you're going to count how many times that happened. That's going to give you how many soul fragments you have so far. The caveat, that's so far. Then you're going to divide your age by that number of souls. And then what I did was use an average lifespan of about 50 years to kind of standardize how far back I go each lifetime. Then you can start finding correlations between what resonates from those eras and what your soul fragments tell you. For example, I have always felt very strongly resonant with the Holocaust as a victim, right? I never figured out why. This was even before that soul fragment expressed. There was always some kind of inkling, and I have no Jewish ancestry that I know of. So there was no great that suffered through the Holocaust that I could even pinpoint. So it was kind of a mystery to me. And now I kind of know why, that there's this part of this other soul that lived through that's now in me, that makes those things resonate. So once you figure out how many soul fragments you have within you and when and who they are, you need to start healing and releasing the fragments. And that's a lot easier said than done. Some fragments just want to be witnessed or seen as the souls they are. Others are stickier. They need to process stuff. They need your help to heal. And those are going to be a work in progress as you move through your life. For me, I was able to release 3 fragments just that night in that fever dream astral marathon that I went through. And overall I had about 9 fragments, I think. You can also put out some kind of ping or beacon or something to call all your fragments to you. Now, this is going to come in the form of people. This isn't going to come in the form of pure energy. It's going to be in the form of people. So once you put this ping out, you're going to have to be on the lookout for people that come into your life suddenly, or who have been there that you've always resonated with, and start asking, do they hold a piece of me? And if so, how can I get that piece back? How can I help them heal? How can I help them become more conscious and aware of it so that I could have my piece back and start to become whole? Because what happens when we become whole is we become the ascended masters. Now, again, caveat, I don't get into the hierarchy thing. I don't think ascended masters have anything over any of the rest of us, except for the fact that they were able to put their soul back together and get out of this place. I was going to say something. I don't want this show to be explicit, but we all know what I'm thinking, right? They've been able to put their soul back together. But the really awful thing that I was shown, and this actually startled me out of my sleep when I had this realization or download or whatever you want to say, was that when you become a whole soul and you live your last lifetime here, the powers that be take you out in such a way that it shatters other people. So whether you're Jesus, who was crucified, and then a religion was created around that has broken so many people, whether you were Martin Luther King Jr., who stood for so much and brought so much good into this world and then was assassinated, or Gandhi, who was also assassinated. Like, all of these people who become whole and sovereign and escape this system are in the end used against the rest of us, used against the population to keep the rest of us held down. Now, that's nothing against the souls of Jesus, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. I don't think that once you become whole, you really have a choice but to, quote, ascend or move on. I think that you can't stay. And the powers that be know that, and so they use you, they use your death, they use your life to break other people, to create more shatterings. And it's really kind of a really awful system, just saying. So that's your heaviness for the week. And I'm sorry that you have to start out on Monday with this information, but I feel like it's really important to get out there. I feel like once we have more conscious awareness of it, we can put ourselves back together. We can be more aware that this is what they're doing and prevent any more damage that they're trying to do. Because ultimately, the name of the game is to stop the game. And the only way to end the game is to bring it into consciousness and to consciously create a reality in which that's not the reality. That's the ultimate goal. So this week, take some time, figure out your timeline, figure out how many soul fragments you have, and maybe start meditating on how you can release these soul fragments to become whole. Spend some time with the different parts of your lifetime to see how you can help those soul fragments release their trauma and move on. And then let me know how it goes. Email me, leave it on Apple reviews, whatever it is. I'm really super curious to know how this goes. If you want to hop into the Discord server and start a conversation about it, I would love to talk to you about it. Because maybe this is just the ravings of a lunatic. Maybe it was just a fever dream. But I really don't think so, and I'm really curious to know how this manifests in other people's lives. So, let me know, and I will see you next week. If you found this episode helpful or insightful, please share it with a friend and leave a review or comment. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I host twice weekly open discussions on the podcast topic on our Discord server. If you'd like to join, head to dimensionalshifter.com/Discord. If you're on Reddit, come join the subreddit r/dimensionalshifters or send me a DM. My username is Dimensional Shifter. Keep deprogramming, keep connecting, keep listening to your intuition. This is it. This is what we've been searching for our whole lives. Connection to our true selves.